Chapter 2. Tamed by a Kiss. Enkidu was formed out of clay. Aruru, goddess of beginnings, dipped dawn fingers into the sea and pitched off a knob of earth, smoothing it into the shape of a man, and that was Enkidu. But the clay she used was full of tree bark, leaf mold, broken snail shells, and seed husks. So the man she made was shaggy and rough, with a pelt of matted hair and a bark-brown face. When he opened his nut-brown eyes, he found himself among animals. The wild ass would stand still while he drank her milk. The birds sing in answer to his whistle. The wild dogs fawn sooner than bite him. But Enkidu did not know if he was ass or dog or bird. Whenever he found traps or nets or pits left by hunters, Enkidu spoiled them because he thought of the animals as his family. But the day he saw Hunter crouching by the waterhole, he felt more puzzlement than hostility. Here was a beast like him, a small, scrawny version of the reflection Enkidu saw when he lay down to drink from the pool. Still, Enkidu's brain was made out of clay, and after the trapper ran away and his smell faded from the waterhole, Enkidu forgot him. Then suddenly one day there came an altogether different smell. As sweet as wild honey, it made the long hairs stir on Enkidu's skin. He walked fast, then faster, breaking into a loping run. The smell was like hunger and thirst, hot and cold, all rolled together into a craving. The woman sitting cross-legged on a blanket, her eyes trailing butterflies through the sunlit trees. At the sight of Enkidu, she raised one arm, waved one hand. She was totally, goldenly, shell-smoothly naked. For hour after hour she sat, fanning herself with a large leaf, or plaiting her long black hair. Closer and closer he sidled, bristling with uneasiness, brimful of strange new appetites. The woman reached out a hand, curling a single finger, beckoning. At last Enkidu put down his head and charged. Arms and legs outstretched, he hurled himself like a boulder onto an egg. But she did not break. And she would not fight. Instead, she curled her arms around his neck and pressed her mouth against his. "Hello," she said. His arms and legs turned to water. His strength ebbed away like water on sand. All his instincts had been right. Here was a snare, an ambush, a trap, a pit which he had fallen. And yet Enkidu did not care. It was a sweet trap, a soft pit, a silken snare. "I am Hattie. The trapper brought me all the way from Uruk. Have you ever seen Uruk, wild man? It's one of the 7 cities of the plain. Once upon a time, 7 wise men founded 7 cities and taught the people how to pray, how to worship, how to make verses and paint and sing and write. Uruk is called the City of Great Streets. In the mornings, a drum summons the men to work. You should see the robes that the great men wear. In Uruk, the vines grow like hair over the roofs of the houses, and the flower sellers move about bright as hummingbirds. The women play with their little children under the shady trees, and there is always a sound of water from the wells. The river winds by, and washed clothes blow about in the trees on the riverside." As she talked, she plucked the burrs from his woolly skin and teased the matted knots out of his waist-length hair. Every time he shaped his mouth into a howl or a snarl, she pressed her lips to his. "Come with me to the camp of the shepherds and meet more men like yourself. Eat roast meat, white bread. Life is good among friends. The warmth of the campfire at night, the smell of baking in the morning." Her voice was musical, and her words fell like rain on his brain of clay. She gave him wine, too, pouring it into his mouth along with kisses. After 7 days, the wind brought him the scent of the hills. Throwing her aside, he leapt to his feet and ran back into the hills, his clay brain slippery with wine, his head a rattle with words. He ran to find the wild ass for a drink of her milk, but the asses scattered. The gazelle sprang away from him in huge arcing bounds. The wild dogs growled, and the birds rose into the sky like ash from fire. He was no longer one of their kind. He had on him the smell of perfume and the sweet oil and wine. Confused, alone, he roamed about, shouting some of the strange words he had heard on the woman's lips. "Jugglers! Temple Top! Lugalbanda! Berry Juice! Gilgamesh!" And his roaring took him back to the drinking place. Still, Hattie sat on her blanket, legs crossed, hands on her ankles. She beckoned to him, and this time he understood when she said, "Come, Enkidu, let me show you some of the world of men." Hunter was delighted at what Hattie had achieved. He could see at once that Enkidu was no longer a beast to fear. There would be no more broken traps or torn nets. Hunter and the shepherds laughed to see how the ignorant brute called Enkidu could not even drink from a cup, did not know what to do with a loaf of bread or a dish of lentils. But Hattie did not laugh. She sat beside Enkidu, her torrent of black hair breaking over his bent knee, showing him how to use a knife, how to refill a cup. The shepherds stopped laughing when they saw him cram down 7 loaves and drain the last of their wine.
"Your food is good,"
said Enkidu, finishing another loaf of bread.
"What must I do to sit by a fireside another day?"
Hunter gasped. Hattie had taught the wild man to speak. "These shepherds take turns at night to keep the watch, guarding the sheep from lions and wolves."
"No longer,"
declared Enkidu.
"I shall keep watch all night, and by day I shall kill lions. I sleep little."
The shepherds looked at one another in delight. The protector of animals had become the protector of flocks. Enkidu, having lost one family in the uplands, had found another in the plains. He was happy, in a restless, waiting way. One evening, at the fireside, Hattie said, "I should go back to Uruk. I am a dancing girl. My place is in the city of streets." "Oh, poor you," said the shepherds with genuine sympathy. "I know. Gilgamesh may be a trial to his people," argued Hunter, "but it was his genius that tamed Enkidu."
"Who is this Gilgamesh?"
said Enkidu, bridling a little. "A tyrant and a marvel, so they say."
"A blessing and a curse, I heard."
"A dream and a nightmare." So Enkidu learned of King Gilgamesh of Uruk, who had worn down his people like water falling on a rock, who had spent them in wars like so many arrows, who exhausted them with his boundless energy. The wild man flared into a rage at what they told him.
"Is that any way for a father of his people to behave? I shall go to Uruk and challenge this Gilgamesh."
He leapt to his feet.
"This demon must not be allowed to trample the hearts of his own people. Soft-palmed, sponge-bellied city sluggard, I shall pound him into clay."
King Gilgamesh was contemplating marriage. Every day he shut himself up in the temple of Ishtar, goddess of love, and the people outside could hear the slap of his sandals on the pavement. The city swarmed with panic. Rumor had it that the king would marry the terrible Ishtar herself. Then a new stir swelled in the marketplace. The crowds parted for a new face, a man almost as alarming as Gilgamesh in his size and the spread of his shoulders. Hattie, the pretty little dancing girl, was with him. The crowd murmured and gasped. "He's the size of Gilgamesh." "Shorter."
"Yes, but thicker set." "A wild man bred up with the lions."
Gilgamesh came out of the temple and turned towards his mother's house. His mind was made up. He would woo and marry the goddess of love. She was the only fitting bride. Enkidu stepped out into his path. Gilgamesh, deep in thoughts of marriage, moved to go around him. Enkidu stuck out a foot and tripped him up. Gilgamesh grabbed Enkidu's arm as he fell and pulled him down too. He was instantly enraged. They wrestled in the doorways of the houses. Their bulk smashed the doorposts and bringing down the lintels. They grappled each other head to head, chest to chest, barging through the walls of buildings. First, Gilgamesh was on his back, his face full of the wild man's hair, his nose bleeding. Then the king was on top of Enkidu, their hands locked together, scattering chickens, demolishing goat pens, overturning pails. The two men wrestled for fully an hour. Then Gilgamesh caught Enkidu off balance, and with a twist of the body, hurled him to the ground. Enkidu lay winded. Gilgamesh, hands clasped on knees, snorted out a triumphant laugh as he struggled to catch his breath. Then Enkidu too laughed, lying on his back. He saw the fearful stars blinking down between the high buildings and laughed out loud.
There must not be another man in the world like you, Gilgamesh.
Gilgamesh sat down with his back against the wall. It was an unfamiliar feeling to be tired out. The two men looked at one another. Then Enkidu flexed his arms, and Gilgamesh flexed his, and they fell on each other again. But this time it was an embrace. They hugged each other with the passion of new friends who know that they will stick together through thick and thin, come what may, do or die.